Thanks everyone for coming on this lovely Wednesday night. I just want to do a quick house rule. So we've got the toilets just next door if anyone needs to go to the bathroom. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, the lights aren't working in the foyer and we're not allowed to have alcohol, so I hope you'll grab nice tasty water. We'll be having post-drinks at Dominion League just down on Beaufort Street after the talk. It'd be nice to see all of you down there and we can have a lovely chat to Joe and Damian. So yeah, without further ado, Joe Roca and Damian Borchok. So basically your studio were winners of the AGDA Agency of the Year last year. And yeah, we're very excited to see what you guys have to say. Perfect, so without further ado, Joe and Damian.
Thanks for coming. It is every time we come over to Perth, it's raining. So yeah, we're talking about. Oh wow, it's very dark. We're talking about. I guess when we started for the people, and for me, when we were developing the business, I actually don't have any really technology background. I was a brand consultant for a long time, in the brand for a while. But one of the reasons I was actually interested in starting a business was around understanding a lot more about how technology was changing our clients' industry, but also our own industry. So it's kind of interesting to get to, as a non-tech person, talk about humans and robots and the fears that we have around technology and all that kind of stuff and how it influences our industry. So Joe and I are going to share the presentation, so we'll sort of swap over every now and then throughout the presentation. And just cover off a couple of, I guess, things that we've been thinking about, a couple of projects that we've been doing, but more than that, it's kind of more an opinion piece about kind of some of the things we think about when we're talking to our clients about technology and the way it's evolving and changing things. But I think one of the really interesting things is that usually when people talk about robots and how technology is changing the world, I think there's usually two extremes that come out at least in the media and often in a lot of the conversations, is that either people are predicting that robots are going to destroy us all, or what a wonderful, remarkable future that we're going to have that's going to be perfect and utopian. It kind of tends to be those two extremes. And I don't think in reality it's ever either of those things. It's usually something sort of either a little bit dull or a little bit crappy in the middle. But it's kind of nice to be able to, I guess, play at those extremes and fantasize about it. But I often find a lot of that commentary isn't actually helpful in the process. But I think when you start to see in the media these kind of things from Boston Dynamics, you start to question sort of where are we heading, because these are all real working prototypes, and Boston Dynamics does work with the military, and so you do wonder what are these things going to be applied to in the coming future. And then when you hear models such as Erica talk about people and herself,
my personal opinion is that a bit further in the future, robots will run the world. I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but I don't think humans are doing a very good job at it.
A little bit creepy, that one. And I think in some ways she's probably right. She could replace the President of the United States without any trouble, I think. But I think when you also read some of the statistics, and this was out of a study done a couple of years ago, but it's still, it was a very large study, that 47% of roles will be replaced by new technologies in the next 20 years. And it won't necessarily be roles wholesale, but there was a guy even talking on the ABC this afternoon about Google has conducted a recent study and said the tasks that a lot of people will be removed. And that will ultimately lead to a contraction in the workforce as a consequence of that. And that will happen, but I think in reality that's happened all throughout time. But I think the people who will lose their jobs and the people most fearful are the ones that get into roles that are most robot-like. And that's the thing that we have to be careful of. If we have a job that we do repetitively and it's kind of day in, day out, same kind of job, expect that to be taken, because that will be the reality. And I think you even see that in the early 20th century, when we industrialised our economies, we moved from agrarian to industrial. We basically changed our factory floors, and we used to have lots and lots of people working on them, like factory hens are nicely lined up, and then we change those out for machines. You can see that our offices in the 21st century are typically structured like that. Even when we work open plan, they're still like what the factory floor looked like. It doesn't take much imagination to know what's going to happen next. And I actually think that whilst the majority of people used to have jobs in factories, we now have jobs in offices. Effectively, what we are, for many people, are actually white-collar process workers. And as a consequence of that, those jobs will be removed over time in various ways. So that can be very scary for people, particularly people living in cubicles. But I think, and you can see that this has kind of been the march over the last 100 years of different types of labour, from sort of brain cognitive labour and physical labour, that in the early 20th century the technology component of this square was kind of about here, and then by the mid 20th century it was kind of here, and now it's starting to actually take more and more. And it's, so if we're in creative jobs with high degrees of social intelligence, high degrees of requirement of perception and manipulation, things that machines find quite difficult, that's a great thing. And I'd certainly hope for our industry that that continues to be a great thing, so long as we remain creative and well ahead of, I guess, the process type stuff. I think if anybody spends their time sort of designing things that just look like the last job, again, automation will quickly fix that. But I think the exciting thing is to do the really creative stuff that will avoid all of those challenges. And so I think that those sort of things will cause people to be terrified, but I actually think that there's often kind of a hysterical reaction to technology, and it's not needed. I think we have to accept that technology is going to take stuff, but I'd like to think that it's going to take a lot of the boring stuff and will allow us to do a lot more interesting things. That's not to say that a lot of roles will change and we need to retrain, and in some ways, at least for me personally, starting for the people was almost like my personal training as much as anything else in the way the world is heading. And it's been an interesting challenge. Sometimes I feel completely useless in certain things, but as you get to re-practice and re-teach yourself things, that starts to shift. So that, I guess that's the first, intro to the Prezzo, and Joe is going to talk about a little bit about, well, what are machines good at and getting better at, and then I'll start to talk about what people are good at. So I think this is where, I'll just sort of move on and let Joe talk about the things that machines are better at than we are.
So I think what annoys me is that this is this apocalypse and these like headlines of and job replacement and automation, and it's like, it feels like clickbait, like, oh, I want to see, is the design role going to disappear in the foreseeable future, etc. But the thing that we need to understand is that robots are better than humans at many things already, and we know this. I'd like to raise your hand here. Who knows, like, who can remember the number of their partners? Who can remember the number of more than 3 friends? You will not be replaced. No, this is the thing, right? I still remember maybe my landline back when I was young. That's the one number I remember. Also because I have it as my password for everything. But machines are good at memorizing. They are also very good at organizing. This is Amazon's factory, and amazing packages being sorted. And you can see that there's like 3 people in the entire factory. No. They're better at convincing. So this is a small clip that I'll show you in a second of, I think it's a company called Smart Action. And
welcome back to Select Direct Customer Care, Mr. Patel. When our last call was interrupted, I understood you wanted to cancel an order.
That voice
Is
of
it
the woman
still
is
correct?
AI.
Yes, that's what I want.
Okay, your account lists 2 orders. 1 monthly order for HAL, Now, magazine, and 1 order for 1 Megatoys robot. Which order would you like to cancel?
Not the magazine, the second one.
Alright, I can cancel your Megatoys order. Or, if you would like to change to a different item, I can offer you a $10 credit on your next order. Would you like to take advantage of the special offer?
Well, my nephew only likes the fun frogs. Do you have anything with them?
1 second while I check our database. We will receive a shipment of Fun Frogs playsets in 2 days, available for $39.95. Would you like to change your order to the Fun Frogs?
Say that again?
Would you like me to place an order for 1 Fun Frogs playset while canceling your order for the Mega Toys robot?
When will it get here?
Express shipping for this order has an expected arrival date of June 16th. Expedited shipping has an expected arrival of June 19th. While
Wait,
standard shipping. Great. Express shipping. Congratulations on your $10 credit. I am sending an email confirmation of this change to the address we have on file. Did my services today satisfy your needs?
Just a sec.
Okay, I'll wait.
No, never mind. I see I have that information in my email you just sent me.
Have I taken care of all your needs for today?
Yes, thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you for calling Select Direct, Mr. Patel. Goodbye.
So aside from it's quite impressive, the ability of she understanding and kind of reacting, and this is the voice kind of revolution will accelerate that process. AIs and machines are very good at convincing, and we see it as they convinced me to listen to music that I didn't know I would listen on Spotify, and then convince us to go and watch something else on Netflix. So they're really good at, and they're only getting better. Machines are absolutely good at playing, and history has kind of proven that. So I actually don't remember, I just remember those last two, but you know, Deep Blue, beating the chess master in 1997, or Jeopardy, don't remember that. I do remember this one. So DeepMind is the first AI kind of neural network, and they were showing this DeepMind for the first time at a conference, and the guy let it run, and he was playing this Atari old school game, I think it's called Breakout. And he just let it run, and you see the computer kind of like clumsily playing at the beginning. He has never played this, so he's just like figuring out the rules. They're pretty easy. This thing moves like left to right, and you just like have this little ball, and you're destroying the walls. So he kind of, you know, screws it up at the beginning, and the public laughs, and it's kind of endearing, really. It's like, cute, he's learning, etc. Minutes later, you see that that the machine's starting to get the hang of it, moving kind of quickly, losing the ball less, etc. Then at the end, within I think it takes him, I don't know if it's minutes, or maybe like an hour, he actually calculates a way that has not even been thought through about to beat this game every single time. So he realized that the best way to beat this game in the minimum amount of moves is make a tunnel on the kind of left or right, and let the thing kind of destroy itself from the inside. So it's kind of like, duh. But it took a machine a matter of like an instant of minutes or an hour to figure that out by teaching itself. So it's not like there was no one informing him about what he was doing. He was just saying self-taught DeepMind, which is unbelievable. And then that made AlphaGo, which is a DeepMind product, beat Lee Sedol last year at AlphaGo. I don't know the game rules of Go. I just know that it is unbelievably harder than chess. And the scene where it's called Move 37, and people, if you just kind of Google YouTube, you see the machine moves on the Move 37. He makes this move, and Lee just gets out of the room. He just doesn't understand what happened. And the commentators are like, whoa, I think the machine just made a mistake, and then he just got back, and everyone all of a sudden starts to realize that it's either a huge mistake that the machine made, or a kind of creative move. And that's kind of like, it doesn't really matter if it's a mistake or a creative move. He just, on that move, completely destroyed the game. So he kind of won a couple of moves later, but that was the turning point of the game. And the thing is, it's not that the machine in this case is better than the champion of Go. It's just that the machine in its training had the ability to train itself so many times. I think he played like millions and millions of times to train himself playing Go. Millions and millions of times before that no human could ever train that much in their lifetime. So you just simply can't compete against them. So they're good at playing. They're good at driving, or they will be good at driving. Actually, some of my Uber drivers, I actually question, how good humans are at driving anyway. They're good at transporting. So Damon was telling me that this is a almost like a autonomous ship container. So actually, now that you think about it, it makes complete sense. They're good at transacting. So I briefly recall this when also I was a kid and I was dragged to hours and hours of queuing with my mum, and now it's almost like come bank app is my best friend. They're good at processing. Again, we've all seen this shift from airports to now like self check-ins, and this one's they're good at diagnosing. So this is IB Watson that has been recently graduated as a so medical, kind of say graduating as a medical degree. That's a completely wrong terminology, but it's amazing how you just feed all the symptoms to IB Watson and he's able to diagnose what he believes is the best, solution or outcome. And they're actually really good at keeping company. So this is Kurobo, and he is a tiny robot, not so tiny, that was sent to the International Space Station to keep company, to keep the astronauts company. So, yeah. This is you.
So on the human side of things, for us, and this is probably the stuff that we probably think more about, because all of those sort of things are often prototypical or at a fairly high level. But for us, there's a number of things that are particularly important in how we start to think about the way that we engage with technology. And the first one is just the fact that we often find it's hard to integrate and hard to understand, and often it's something, unless you have a strong technical background, difficult to relate to. But I think one of the key things that our industry seems to do is, and not just our industry, I'm talking about the wider communications industry, sometimes sort of get it really wrong. As in their attempt, they kind of think, there's a lot of talk about technology and people sort of wanting to play in that space, and at its worst is, and I don't know how many of you people, it was pretty widely publicised, was the IC scam, which was allegedly an app that Gray in Singapore had created, that they put in a whole bunch of communications awards, and they actually won a lot of awards for it. It was an app that was supposedly something that helped recognise refugees on the sea and help to locate them and make sure that they would be safe. That was found out to be a complete scam, and there was a lot of controversy about it, and they had to give back awards and after sort of much toing and froing. And it's often that's kind of symptomatic. I think often in more in the ad land world, where there seems to be a lot of competition for awards and to gain publicity. And it's almost like the technology is almost like the veneer that they're pretending to actually embed. And these sort of things aren't a good way of actually approaching. I think that the importance of technology and how that's going to transform our industry. And more recently, there was Publicis has recently come out and famously talked about how they were not going to do any awards next year. And they were going to put $2 million from those awards into actually developing an artificial intelligence. Now, when they said $2 million, I immediately thought something was fishy, because $2 million is nothing. When we talk to you a little bit later on about Streamtime, which is a piece of work we did, which was a relatively modest piece of technology, really, our client had to spend $4 million of even getting that to market. So $2 million for a global organisation to produce a piece of AI is highly questionable. But they recently went out with, and I'll just show you some snippets from the video. This is the global CEO of Publicis, so it's a man who's probably earning many millions of dollars a year, and his team explaining. And so the first two are the team, and then the next two are actually part of the extended video showing the usage of this AI, which is called Marcel. There's a quote he uses in the end, at the start of this, which you might be able to pick up on, and we might even ask you whether you can actually understand what the hell he's talking about, because I don't know what a bread bomb build is, but you'll see it, and so I might be mishearing him, but it's really odd, and none of us have worked out what he's talking about.
This time, I'm not alone. I am with my friends. Well, enough teaser. Let's make bread bomb build real. We have an important initiative to share with you in order for Publicis to continue to transform. If we want to become a platform, we need to build one.
Our platform will be the first ever professional assistant that uses AI and machine learning technology across our 80,000 people in 130 countries to connect, co-create, and share in new and different ways. And through Sapient and the power of one, we're going to make it happen. The great thing is, it's designed for people, by people.
We've been asked to create a new retail subscription service, and I need data that shows exactly how they feel about things like this.
Just tell me what you're looking for, and I'll analyze data, insights, and trends from across the group and around the world.
Another fintech IPO is stealing headlines. We need some game-changing business ideas to make sure we stay relevant.
Based on your business transformation agenda and trends I see in your industry, I found relevant experts who have ideas that can help.
So that's just a little excerpt from the video, but to me it smells really fake. From the kind of cliched commentary for those last two videos, the way that CEO was talking, it just felt really unnatural and very unreal. From the investment to just the cliches that came out of the mouths of the two people at the top, it just felt like, is this another attempt at the industry pretending to embrace technology, or are they going to pull it off, and are they going to pull it off for $2 million? And it kind of, there's a lot of commentary around the wider communications industry actually not properly embracing technology, and this really worries me that when something is so highly publicised like this, is this going to further actually worsen, I think, the image of the wider industry. Because I think it's important to recognise that there are a whole range of people in other industries that are actually recognising that people and machines and technology actually make very good partnerships. And I don't know whether many of you actually follow John Mader's Designing Tech reports, but they're pretty good. And he's kind of regularly made comments about how other industries have acquired either design firms, industrial design firms, innovation consultancies. And you can see the acquisitions, and this is just sort of a summary, I think fairly US based, that you can see that over 50% of acquisitions of design firms since 2004 have actually been design firms acquired by tech firms. So clearly technology firms recognise the kind of work that is either done in our industry or related industries is important to their future. You can also see in this data that consulting firms which do a lot of work in tech space anyway are also the main acquirers of our kind of industry. So it's pretty clear that other industries are recognising the value of the designer. So the importance of tech coming back into our industry is fundamentally important, I think, in terms of our own future. And I think when you look back through the history from, again, the early 20th century when I guess the idea of the designer first emerged, and the idea of a designer first came with industrialisation. When people were separating out roles and creating specialist roles, the role of the maker and the designer got separated. And the reason for that was that to manufacture things actually required a very specific skill set. And as a result of that, the makers became makers and manufacturers, and the designer had a very specialised role. Because it wasn't possible for necessarily many designers to actually do all of those things as one, and that became a whole industry which we now work in. But over time, from that kind of fairly, I guess, simple transition that ultimately spawned a whole bunch of different industries, through to the 21st century, design has always influenced us. From, I know designers talking of the period where they shifted from magic markers to computers. It was a massive shift, and the first place I worked at was Cato Designing in this industry, and they were one of the last studios to actually adopt computers because they felt like the purity of the craft would be lost. there's always a fear of the technology. And that's going to influence us more and more whether AI does come into it. I think a lot of the work that we do can easily be mechanised. And we often quite consciously avoid anything that looks like it's repetitious work, because we actually think that it's much better that something else or someone else does that kind of work, even in our own industry, so that we can keep looking at how new technologies can influence. And in the end of John Mader's report, he said that, you know, the future of design, at least in his view, was this idea of computational design, is that we'll be designing for humans always, but actually a lot of the times we'll be designing for computers, because actually a lot of the decisions that are made in the internet world are actually decisions made by computers, and so you have to design for the way they think and the way they see things, which is a very different type of design, all the way through to the varying interface designs that are happening. We know the visual interface, but we're very quickly dealing with things like voice or other features that don't actually include any interface at all, it's visual. And as a result of that, the way we think about design and the role of design will change pretty significantly.
Another thing that we recognise is in living with robots is actually, even though Damian just said that computational design would be one of them, designing for humans, after all, is another key one. And this comes from, I think we've often have had to work for the machines. So even at the beginning, you know, when the first machine started, it's almost like we learned how to code, we learned how to speak their language. And now machines are getting smarter and smarter, so they're starting to understand how we communicate. But somehow, all of the kind of programs and softwares, and they all look like spreadsheets and like, you know, this is things that should not be consumed by any human. Yet that's the life of a project management software, and actually that is Streamtime. That was one of our clients. When they came to us 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. They showed us this product and they were like, we need a rebrand. And we're like, I am so sorry, but you do not need a rebrand. What you really need is to rethink the product from scratch. We tried to use it. We actually, at Further People, kind of think that we don't need client managers and we don't need project managers, and we didn't want timesheets, and we were like a bit rebellious in that regard. And when Streamtime came, it's like, yes, it's for timesheets and it's like, what? But why? So we did take it as a personal kind of task to make a project management software that would actually work for us. And after a lot of research, we quite quickly realized that people absolutely hate timesheets. Actually, not a lot of research. We just knew that people hate timesheets. The 7.5 at the end of the day, or someone just nagging you in the back, like, have you done your timesheets? The fooling around of like, we don't have enough budget on this timesheets. Can you just put it on another job? So all of these kind of like unspoken rules around keeping track of time was a reality that we had faced, that we could face, and you know that the industry faces as a whole. This was from one of the interviews that we had done. So to be honest, I really don't want to know how much time we spent on something. It's generally always more. You're never really being completely compensated. It's inevitable. We over-deliver. And I think that's kind of like our weakness and our strength as an industry, really. So we started to try to not even record our time, but record what we were doing at the office. So we had these huge to-do lists initially at the beginning. So everyone had kind of big to-do lists, and they were like, ooh, everyone loves taking kind of a to-do list down. And actually it was really interesting that some people would go back and write things that they've done to just come back and tick them off. So it's like this thing. But then we realized that actually in order for it to work as a team, I needed to understand what other people were on, so we made them even bigger. So it was, let me show it again, Sam, he had like the entire calendar there, and he was like, I'm doing this, and as soon as he got them down, he put them kind of below. So that was really our prototype, we tested it for weeks and weeks, amended every time people had different nomenclatures on the cards, and that was what led us to the final product, which is this. So it is kind of based on the premise of a list, and you do have tasks. You know, you do your list of tasks for the day. The tasks are assigned to a job. The job has a budget. The moment that you put them down, you kind of stretch up and down the tasks, and that's like, okay, that took me 2 hours, done. And inevitably, you are tracking time by doing that. So we were like, we did not do timesheets yet. We are tracking time. We have made something that everyone in the office is using, and it's something that it seems that everyone who is currently using StreamTime loves.
What's StreamTime? It's project management for humans. And humans are short on time, so let's keep this real snappy. Rewind to 2015. StreamTime is 14 years old, struggling to stay relevant. It was overfeatured, dated, desperately in need of a revamp. With new competitors appearing every day, it was time to make a change. How could we make StreamTime better for every user, not just management? Could we evolve it beyond a standard project management tool? A tool that doesn't rely on timesheets? They're inaccurate, forgotten, and loathed anyway. Could it still deliver on everything a business needs? Welcome to the new StreamTime, where to-do lists are the new timesheets. Let's take it for a spin. Planning jobs. You pick your team, you estimate your hours, and you set deadlines. Simple, intuitive. Then you track your team's progress with clear visual indicators that let you know whether or not your project's on time and on budget. Quoting and invoicing. Just click this button on the job plan. Click. Quote generated. Invoices sent to Xero are also just a click away. Easy, right? Reporting. Now with no useless bits. Time and expenses are broken down in a clear, easy to follow way. Your to-do list. This shows you what you need to do this week, and it's all automatically scheduled based on your team's job plans and deadlines. Then you drag things from to-do to done, and bam, time recorded. No more filling out timesheets like a chump. That's StreamTime. Sound good? Great. It's everything a business needs, and something everyone wants to use.
What was really cool about working with the guys at StreamTime was, I think all of the agency at the moment was working on StreamTime simultaneously. We were working on the marketing side, we were working on the product, we were working on the brand. And we got really excited to the point that when we finished the marketing page, which is like kind of side scroll, at the end we had this idea of like, you know when you're on a Chrome browser and you're not on the internet, and you have like that little dinosaur that plays, it was like, yeah, the T-Rex, yeah. We were like, why don't we just do that for the people, like an Easter egg, the people that just scroll to the very end and keep on scrolling. They stumble into a run through the time stream, and they have little Aaron just like dodging stuff. And it was interesting because this was not on the budget, this was not planned at all, and we were like, people working like just simply to deliver this, and we're like, Aaron, who's a StreamTime founder, like, oh, we did this, and he's like, okay, it's not gonna affect anything, let's try it. And yeah, and it's amazing simply because all of the passion that went through building this, working with the guys at StreamTime, even the kind of guts or courage that it takes for a project management software to change so radically. They're pretty much becoming, they made their product extinct by creating this. However, 155 conversion rates, and we currently are working with them again. And it's amazing because we've just finished a research on, okay, what are the things that are missing? So it's like round 2 of StreamTime now. So we have all the metrics, all the things that work, and it is really rewarding when you see comments, not just like, oh, it looks good and it looks nice, and we've managed to create tech for humans, but also it works, and have you thought about this? And it's like the conversations just get to kind of another level. And as I said, it was an interesting process simply also because we were we focused mainly on the product and delivering the features that we thought were relevant for the industry. And there was a moment I remember when we were presenting, and Aaron was like, and what's our logo? We've been working for months, and we're like, the logo. And we had to go back. It's like the brand was kind of conceived after, and we knew exactly where it was because we had almost instinctively started to play with it. So it was a matter of like the brand came even like second or third after we've done the product. And yeah, that's part of the brand and how it informs everything else.
And so the last piece is this idea that when we're talking, one of the great things that technology doesn't properly have yet is foresight. Who knows what will happen? It can predict certain trends and events that are likely to progress, but I think the really great leaps people are still going to be able to make, and that's the really nice thing that I think we've got to our advantage, which is kind of cool. And so there are kind of two parts to this. I'll talk about the first one. And the first one is this idea that as designers, we've always had to respond to the technology, whether it's the introduction of Macs or actually just our industry even existing, and then the introduction of the internet, and now things like AI and chatbots and all these other big and wonderful things. But it is actually quite, the change is actually accelerating faster and faster. But I think it's getting more and more exciting about the potential for where stuff can go. And one of the interesting things we've been tackling is with given things like voice activated technologies, or even the miniaturization down from phone, which looks small enough, and now into watches. It's even harder to actually design anything visual for this stuff. What do you do if you work in a visual space? But what we've found that's really interesting is that you can still apply design thinking to any of these things. And I think even Streamtime, many of us have never really worked on building, well actually I don't think any of us have worked on building a product, let alone a software product before. And it actually wasn't about in-depth knowledge of technology, it was actually about asking the right questions about how people want to use stuff and having a point of view about that. And us having such a strong point of view about, we actually hate timesheets. We always hated them in our previous role, so why would we ever want to have a piece of software in our business like that? Was actually one of the things that really drove why we thought about it differently. Similarly for this sort of technology, we're starting to think about, well, what comes next for if a lot of our work might be visual output, or what's the alternative for these kind of instances. And I think, this is a quote from Joe, but I'll quote it because Joe's been doing quite a lot of work in actually, if you take away an interface, what do you then design? So, if conversation flows, personality, tone of voice, use of language, and how conversations are accessed is increasingly the new UI. Then are writers, data scientists, linguists, anthropologists, the new designers. And it's potential that they will be. And these will be some of the skill sets we may actually be looking for in the future in terms of bringing in unique skill sets into our industry. But it doesn't mean we don't have a voice in this kind of work. I think we're at the very early stages where really, whilst there's a lot of people that come out and like to talk about, next year AR and VR is going to change the world and AI is going to change the world again, really, my personal view is nobody knows nothing right now. It's such an early industry, we don't know the potential of it. There are so many conflicting arguments for and against. As the reality is, I kind of feel like in these emergent technologies, I feel like I'm back in 1995 when the internet started emerging, and a lot of experts who knew nothing were making pronouncements about stuff that were wrong. And so I think we have an opportunity to learn as we go, but we can only learn if we participate. And I think it's kind of interesting. I'll just play this video because it kind of just shows, and some of you have probably already seen this, I can see some people smiling, that it shows we're very, very early days, and AI is quite primitive, even though it also seems quite magical. And this is a little boy who asks for something and gets something completely different.
Play ticker ticker. Lata, play ticker ticker.
Bobby, can you talk to play wheels?
You want to hear a station for porn detected. Porno ringtone. Hot chick, amateur girl, porn, sexy.
No.
Needle dildo ringtone.
Alexa, stop!
So how many times is that going to happen? I don't know. They're not very smart right now, are they? So I think there's a lot that we can do. But I think that one of the things that's really interesting for us, if you can just talk to this thing, and we're actually working with a client who, actually 2 clients that work with in AI at the moment, and so you have to think quite differently because there's not as much visual in the process. But at the end of the day, and this is a quote from John Lasseter, because I think actually organisations like Pixar kind of understand, even though they also work in a highly visual medium, is that there's a solution here. And you know, the connection that we make with our audience is actually an emotional connection. The audience can't be told to feel something, they have to discover it for themselves. And I think one of the skills of a designer is we think about how do we create an emotional impact with an audience through the combination of things as we think our way through something. And I think Pixar's really interesting is that whilst they are operating in a visual medium, really what sits underneath their strength is this idea of that all of their characters have great personality. Their themes are hugely, deeply involved around human themes. And then lastly, they're very good at storytelling. And I think it's certainly these 3 things are things that we hold as very important in terms of our own business, in terms of our future. And this, to be able to develop, I think, the right interfaces that actually aren't even visual. You have to be good at being able to create personalities, to be able to, I think, access people's emotions and to understand what people need, but also to be able to tell great stories. And that's a skill that a writer, a designer, a strategist can actually develop. And when we work as completely combined teams. And so we don't actually have a strategy for stage, design stage, or writing stage, and implementation stage. All of our teams actually work together collectively so that we're actually building these elements and bringing all of our own skills to it. And so that doesn't mean, you know, a designer feels like they've left out because we might be doing something that isn't design related. When we're developing you know, interfaces that don't have a lot of design element, may have more storytelling or verbal interaction, those kind of things still require the skill of a designer. And so that's an incredibly important part of what we do. And we'll come back to this a little bit later on with a project that Joe's been working on that's kind of a work in progress.
And I think the second bit to the foresight is design as a reaction to the world. And what we mean by that is the world is pretty chaotic at the moment. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of things broken in the world. And it is almost a responsibility as a designer. We are problem solvers, but let's focus on the right problems. So this is almost like, even for younger designers, an ambition to not be selfish and not be self-centered, but actually look around and see what's broken and see and fix it. And I think one of the, again, I don't think there's a tech talk without talking about Elon Musk, but he is that type of guy that just goes there and he's like, okay, traffic is chaos, and he goes off and sends a tweet creating, I'm the boring company, and that becomes a thing. Or it's like he understands that there's better ways to transport and goes off and creates Hyperloop, or understands that the world will run out of oil and that we're just like destroying it, and goes and invests on Solar City and goes and creates, you know, these gigafactories, or gigafactories, gigafactories. So he is an example of that. We don't need to be Elon Musk. We see things broken left, right, and center. So it is our duty to spot them and do something about it, really. And I think a good example of that is hiring back for the people. One of the things that was really broken is we're only 12, and we unfortunately too busy day to day that one of the things that we've kind of dropped the ball is recruitment, because we don't have a HR person. It's almost like hiring me, and it's like this on Monday stand-ups is like, does anyone have any interviews? And kind of people raise their hands, and it's like the type of thing that it's everyone's role to hire the next best talent. We are called for the people, but at the same time it's no one's role because it's no one's responsibility. So we saw that a girl at the office called Amanda and myself. This is what happens if you go to For the People and you go to contact us or want to work with us. You get asked a series of questions, and the questions land on our Slack channel, contact us, and that's how it looks. And we get, you know, messages and messages, and it's actually quite it's shocking to see how little, like, they do not get a response from us simply because it's like, just have too many things, and this is all what we get. And I remember one as preparing a talk a couple of months ago, and I was looking for some examples of the people. It was for students, so how do you reach out to people? And I realized that there was this person that had, written a really cool introduction, a really cool piece, and I was like, oh, we haven't gone back to this person. And then I realized, actually by typing his name, that it was the 3rd time that he had gotten in touch with us. And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Like this has to be solved. The problem is, this is what we needed. We need someone to help us hire the best people for the people, who gets back to people right away, who really impresses them with their smarts, who's prompt, courteous, but not without personality, who can do the busy work, the heavy lifting, and the scheduling for us. So that's one of the things, is you have to get one, you have to reply, you have to go and check their folio, then you have to go and see the calendar of the people that might be interested in interviewing them, then you have to go and collect feedback, who knows when to send an email and when to send a Slack notification, who won't get distracted and forget to reply to an email from an inbound candidate, someone who isn't biased, who won't take up a salary, because we can't afford someone like that. We need someone who can deal with our crazy calendars, who will get along with Miguel, that's our dog, who can keep not 1, not 2, but 12 people in the loop at the same time, and know who to nudge with reminders and who to leave alone, to schedule interviews for us, to remind us to record feedback after interviews, someone who can read people, someone who doesn't need to be told what to do, someone to tell us what to do. We need a robot. So when we were writing this description, we're never going to find this person for 0 money. So what can we do? It's well, why don't we just have a go on building something that can help us with this? So introducing Mr. Hire. We called him the Director of First Impressions. That's our name. And what was really interesting was we've never done this. Amanda she has a product strategy background, and I'm a designer. We were how do we go about it? And the one thing that we realized is we need to prototype his personality first. Who is this Mr. Hire person that we're talking about? So it was really interesting because we went on this wonderful and a bit absurd road to get to figure him out. So we wrote a backstory. I actually took a writing class exclusively focused, 12 weeks, exclusively focused on developing Mr. Hire. We wanted his backstory not to be, I think a lot of you have already kind of interacted with chatbots, and we didn't want it to be a functional chatbot. We wanted him to actually kind of have a say, or kind of be, so his backstory was, Mr. Hire is a bot who knows that AI will come and conquer the world eventually, and he is just kind of waiting for that to happen. Meanwhile, he's manning desk for the people. So he knows he's better than us. He's a bit of a smartass that way. And he knows these human beings just waste a lot of time worrying about stuff or being all emotional stuff. So he doesn't get kind of caught up in those kind of details. It's really fast, it's really efficient, but he's just waiting the day where Watson becomes president, and he's okay, love the revolution. So that's kind of his story. And that has informed, when we wrote up his backstory, it informed okay, where can we grab these kind of bits and bobs? We did a movie trailer.
700 years into the future, mankind will leave our planet, leaving Earth's cleanup in the hands of one incredible machine.
Where is everybody? Oops. Hello. I am C-Video Human Cyborg Relations.
Who's your girlfriend?
Oh, I'm not his girlfriend. I'm his girl Friday.
Associates don't get secretaries.
I'm not like other associates. And she's not like other secretaries.
Bullshit.
Donna?
Okay, listen, Rain Man. You wear lifts in your shoes, you want braces, but you don't have the balls, and you have a cat that you love more than it loves you.
It's good to see you, Lewis.
I'm your new quartermaster.
You must be joking.
Hazard, I can do more damage on my laptop sitting in my pyjamas before my first cup of Earl Grey than you can do in a year in the field.
Oh, so what do you need me?
Every now and then a trigger has to be pulled.
Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and they ask me to take
This was the best one from Mr. Iyer.
Job satisfaction.
He should be in.
Good luck out there in the field. And please return the equipment in one piece.
Brave no more.
We acted out. We did a lot of flows, and it's really interesting. But the bit that we forget, even when we do a chatbot, is we make it quite transactional. Like if you sit down in the computer and you write it down, it will sound text messaging and it will sound chatbot. But the moment you read it out loud, so there we were, like Amanda and I recording each other on the things that we would say, it was like, we sound enough. It's just again and again, and recorded a bunch of those interactions. And even now, so we presented to the agency, we're like, okay, we have a new employee, he's called Mr. Hire, now we need to build him. Because we had the entire thing, but we just, we now need to make it work. And we had done integrations with Zapier. We had like tried to hack it, but it just felt clumsy. So now we're in the process of working to actually get him to life. This is one of the scripts where kind of everything's coming together, and Mr. Hire is like, hello. So imagine you're on the web page, and Mr. Hire just introduces, hello, Amy is the candidate, hi, how can I help? And Amy says, I want to work for the people. And he's like, yeah, that's a good start. What's your name? And he's like, she says, I am Amy Lebowski. Mr. Hire will reply, okay, Amy Lebowski. He will automatically, he always reads first and last names, don't know why. Let me ask you a couple of questions. What exactly are you after? A freelance role, an internship, or a permanent position? And she says, a permanent position. You know, I'm a designer, you see. And he's like, good, they're in desperate need of a good designer. I also need your folio, LinkedIn profile, or any social handle you like to share. And Amy says, yes, of course, you know, here you go. She uploads her Behance, her LinkedIn, and her Twitter. And she just says, I have more than 5,000 followers on Twitter. Ding. And he's like, I can talk to 5,000 people at the same time. So he is clearly not impressed with any kind of human. Okay, Amy Lebowski, one more thing. What's the last book you read? It's the kind of question that we tend to ask it for other people anyway. And she says, I am currently reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's this really great book. And he's like, they don't. There's no such thing as electric sheep. So like, cut her. Looks at the things that have been uploaded, document, and he says, I think I have everything I need from you, Amy Lebowski. I'll get back to you shortly, or as soon as a human from FTP checks their Slack channel. Apparently, I don't have the algorithm necessary to judge if you can be your next hire. Or so they say. One day, though, one final thing, how do you want me to reach out? Email or mobile, etc., etc. So that was like kind of like the first interaction that you get on the website talking to Mr. Hire. So we'll see. Cross fingers. We'll let you know, and you can test him like complete failure. I knew exactly what Mr. Hire was.
And that kind of work is not only kind of allowing us to play around with technology. We have a really strong point of view about the tone of voice and the role it plays, and we're sick to death of seeing tone of voice done in our industry that kind of sounds like a variation on innocent drinks or some other sort of corporate-friendly tone of voice. We've recently been, over the last 6 months, we actually worked with a guy who's he's sort of a public commentator, but most of his career has been an author and an academic in literature. And we're spending a lot of time rethinking how tone of voice can play a role in building brands, because I think there's such a blandness in the language that we use. To me, that is all about what a client wants our audience to say rather than the kind of communication an audience wants. And we're trying to think of ways of actually how you start to turn that on its head. Now, I think if a large corporation saw Mr. Hire in the way we want him to talk, they'd run a million miles from that. So this kind of project is a kind of, for us, a way of trying to prove and build even data on if we can make these interactions right and the language right. It's a way of actually proving to our clients that you can actually think about tone of voice and human interactions in a far broader and richer way than I think most of them actually think about that. But just to finish up, yeah, it's kind of, in terms of technology and the way it's going to influence, we don't have a choice. It is going to influence us one way or another, so we can either ignore it or we can actually embrace it. And I think we're having more and more fun every year as we get more comfortable with it and realise that actually a lot of stuff is a lot of talk, and as you start to play with things, you start to get more comfortable and learn a lot from technology. But I think just some 3 things for us is that firstly, tech is not the end of the world, it's not an apocalypse, but the exciting thing is it's the start of new ones. It's just we don't know where they're going to end up. But I think if we stay open-minded about that and look at where the potential is, and actually talk to clients about this, because often clients come to us with no tech preconception in their mind about whether we're going to do any of that for them, and often it's us proactively suggesting things to them, and they go, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's give that a go. So often that's how the conversation starts. I think, as I said, tech's always changed what we do. It's just actually happening a lot harder and faster and more commonly, so we have to embrace that. But I think, we always criticise our clients for not being adventurous enough, but I actually think as an industry we need to learn to be a lot more adventurous ourselves. What we're talking about with technology is substantial change in the way that we behave, the way that we learn, the way we interact, the skills that we need. But I think I think the skill in actually learning how to change and learning to evolve should be a skill that we develop and actually make it a core skill, because change isn't going to get any slower, it's going to get a lot faster. And I think the organisations that embrace that are the ones that are going to have the most fun, I think, creatively for the future. So thank you for your time. I hope there were some questions as well. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe. So I'll put it back to you guys. Do you have any questions for John? Damian? Yeah, we've got one off the bat.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for that presentation. Really good, Anthony from Black Box Design. I just wondered what your opinion was on sort of counterculture to technology that currently exists. Because obviously, if we recognise that robots are going to take a lot of jobs, but there's people that are still going to need jobs, how do we reconcile that? And similarly, how come record sales are going through the roof?
I think, like I said at the start, I don't think it's either of those dichotomies. It's not going to be a beautiful, perfect world where we don't need to work, and I don't think it's going to be the end of the world either. I think it's always messier and more complex than that, and I think that's a good thing. In fact, I'm probably one of the I'm very cynical about technology. I'm probably one of the most cynical people in our business about it, because I get tired of the bullshit that's talked about it. And I know there are a lot of guys in our business that love the latest product, the latest apps and what have you, and I just love taking them off my phone. So I'm probably more at the counter side of it because of that. But for me, I think that's part of the richness of actually the friction that's created when something new changes. There's always friction, there's some destruction, there's creativity. As I said, it's messy, and that's one of the things I really like about it, and that's humans at play. Like, we're messy, complex, emotionally rational things, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially it feels like, in the design community, there's a pushback to craft, and some of that old school rather than just adopting the latest technology because you can.
Yeah, I think the really wonderful thing is that this is forcing people to make choices about where they want to stand. And we're seeing, I think you're right. I think, there are organisations like Pentagram, which is a classic, quite an old school organisation that is probably as busiest as it's ever been in its history because of its commitment to its craft. And if you like that type of design and modernist view of the world, they're brilliant at it. And so by holding fast to those classical skills, they're hugely successful for that. But similarly, you have other organisations like AGDA, which kind of lead the way in a very different way. And I think that's where brands are good. Like, you make choices about things, and you say we do this, but we don't do that. And like in our business, we reject probably at least half the work that we get put in front of us, because either the interaction with the client's not going to be right, or their brief is that they want us to design logos and brochures and stationery suites. And again, for us, in our view, those are the kind of jobs that can get almost automated pretty quickly. We're not interested in that. We like stuff that's complex and it might have a degree of technology or human behaviour problem in it, and dealing with those kind of complexities is more interesting for us. I don't know if you...
Yeah, and just touching on that last part of the question about record sales, do you think it's something to do with the tone of voice as well, like the richness of the tone? Or?
I think it has to do with the authenticity. Is that it's much more real. It's like, even if it, you know, some people say they sound better. I don't agree with that. But I'm not a purist. I'm in the scheme of things. But I love the fact that it's people getting, there's a high degree of nostalgia happening at the same time as change, and I think people like things to balance ultimately. And so, whilst you see high tech, you'll see the other extreme, because the people need to reconnect, whether it's with nature or records or something, because so much of what we're now experiencing through technology is artificial. And so I think that's the response. Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? I saw some hands.
With a client like Streamtime that came to you for a rebrand and then you had to flip it on its head, how did the client respond to that?
We have it recorded because Aaron records everything. It wasn't us, it was him. No, actually, we were recording that conversation for him. And there is a couple of reactions internally. We were not agreeing on it, so it was like, this is a bold move, and that's the video that we had recorded, because we had like a big argument of like, what are we doing, it's our business, etc. But for him, it was like, this is exciting, this is scary, this is exciting, this is scary, and that's why I said that type of project happens like every blue moon. You have to have the right client with the right mindset and at the right time for it to occur. Otherwise, you know, it's easy to fall back on a product that is working, that has customers, and be crazy to walk away from that. And crazy it was, and he did. So more to him than to us, really.
Pretty rare though.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot from that experience, from the idea of even just videoing our internal sessions and sharing them to clients. Like, we share pretty much everything, and as Joe said, we got into a fight, and Aaron just said that was the best thing to see, is actually the agency fighting it itself, to actually try and work through it, because it gives them a sense of our thought processes and the arguments that we put for and against, rather than in the space of a 1 hour presentation trying to compress, you know, it might be 2 or 3 weeks worth of thinking. You know, so that was one thing, but then just our learning about what sort of clients we want to work with, and how we actually explain to them that maybe what they came to us for isn't actually what they need to get the result. All of those things are, I guess, learnings that particular clients allowed us to do. We were lucky that they came in early in the evolution of our business, and it certainly solidified. I think we were kind of fuzzy on what we wanted to do as a business, only sort of 18 months in, but how that gave us a really strong degree of confidence that it was a successful project with a great client, and we got to do things that we always wanted to do. So that it's kind of said, like, we want to find more clients that are like that, maybe not exactly the same, but there's certain conditions that we know what to look for now.
How did you describe that goal state to them? Because that's a shift, a journey that you took them on, right? So did you have an articulation of a goal state, not knowing where it was going to go, but this sense of a vision that they could then buy into? Or was it the sense that you gave them confidence in your skills and would hold their hand on that journey?
I think there's two things. Specifically for Streamtime, one is that the reality that their product would one day be extinct. So it was there was a declining already, like statistics were on our side.
It's a burning platform.
Yeah, it was even when we did all the research and we talked to a lot of people, you knew that they had to use it because they had no choice, because their entire life was in there in terms of business, but that love was not there. So it was it's one of those like love and hate, I have to do it. So we had that in to back us up. It's not like just inventing these problems. And at the same time, I think we've gotten really good at not exactly knowing where we're headed at a specific time, but being comfortable with that, uncertainty. And that's something like, again, when we work with clients, we need to get them comfortable as well with that. It's not like we don't do deliverables, or at the very beginning, it's almost like this is our sprint 1, sprint 2 will be decided once sprint 1 is finished, and it's clear from the start that that's how we work as a process, so they know it's not like surprise, but at the same time, it's a lot of uncomfortable, and we're just getting more comfortable being uncomfortable, I suppose. So yeah, there is a confidence around that as well.
Yeah, I think that our response to that client discomfort is one of the reasons for that transparency, is that we realise that our process to a traditional client is used to going through traditional, I guess, activities like what they might think they're doing. We have to de-risk that for them as much as possible, because we can't get rid of it, but we do have this sort of oscillation between absolute terror and euphoria, in particularly the early stages. And we have to be constantly convincing the client that we're not crazy, that we do know what we're doing. And one of them is the transparency around video, but another one is that the number of interactions we have with clients is a lot more common. Like with Streamtime, we were with them, if not every day, there were at least a couple of interactions a week where we were face to face with their development team or their leadership and what have you. And so that they see us a lot more, and we break down things into much smaller bite-sized chunks that we can deal with, rather than going, this is the massive vision. It's almost like you don't want to show them the end state anyway, partly because we don't fully know it at that time. But what we're doing is that they're taking a small step with us, and then the next step and the next step. In their case, we also prototyped a lot of things, and we tested things, and things that we got excited about, like some of the language we were using. Like one of the headlines that we were using was "Welcome to the End of Time." And we quickly found out in A/B testing that apocalyptic messages didn't really sell. And so, but then all of a sudden, messages that we thought were pretty innocuous were giving us sort of a 65% uplift in people wanting to click through to the next stage of the process. So those kind of things all just help, I think, give the client a better sense of where they're heading. That said, we work with almost no large corporate clients. Because our process is very specific, and you actually have to work to our process to make that work well. The traditional, we'll see you in 3 weeks' time with one presentation, and then I'll sell it up to my boss type crap is just, it's not, to me, it's not conducive to learning. It's not conducive to the client actually engaging with the process, them learning. To me, often I say the test of a project failing is a client actually wanting guidelines for their brand, because they don't actually understand their brand if they actually need guidelines. And so for any project, we want, by the end of the first few stages, the clients to be as confident about what we're doing and to talk about what we're doing internally as we are. We know that they then have ownership of it. So we talk about this idea of co-authorship or shared authorship of the work that we do. Clients will go, in strategy, clients will often go, I don't like those few words there, they just don't really work for me. So our response is, that's good, go away and work on it, because that's actually your strategy. When you're not correcting our homework, that's not this process. And so making sure that they're involved, because it's for them at the end of the day, they have to work at it too.
Yeah, all right, nice one, thanks.
But just a question myself, actually. So how then do you go from, I guess, not signing off with that client, because that's more or less a client for life, like you kind of travel with them on that journey, how then do you kind of cut those ties and like send them on their merry way, for lack of a better term? Like, do you know what I mean? Is there a constant communication happening between the agency?
So we there is physically, we have a stream time channel on their side that we still are present, and we talk almost every day since. But it was really intense. We had the entire for the people kind of working on it, and then as soon as we started getting things done, it eventually went down to like 2 or 3 people. I remember working there maybe like 2 days a week as well to kind of get just working really closely with the devs. But the amount of interactions that we had with them, and with not only Aaron or management, but the entire team, like we knew them as if they were an extension for the people, and they knew us as well. It meant that when the time was to roll out or to kind of do more features, they knew exactly what they were, like they believed in it, it was their new stream time. So it's really easy, so we had a smooth transition. And now, a year and a half later, we're back into working again, and it's amazing because now we do have a lot of data. Like this product has been out for a year or so. We know the customers. We've kind of like just finished the research stage on this, and it's almost like, okay, we had a vision back then. The vision was us imagining this vision. Now we have data to back up this vision or adjust the compass on things that we thought weren't right. So that's, it's the what we're going through now.
Any other questions? Perfect. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Damian. It's been very insightful. So if you'd like to join us down at Dominion League, feel free to. I'm not too sure what the weather's like out there, but it's...
It was like, wow.
I think it's cooled off a little bit more, but it's just straight at the end of the block and then to the right, and you'll see it just from the street. Perfect. Free drinks on AGDA, first round, so feel free to join us. Thanks again, guys.
I know.